Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy, but what we're going to do today is we're reading an email that Jimmy got that he thought was important to talk about regarding John Steinbeck's Johnny Bear. Email to Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com is another feature of this series. So when we get interesting emails, and they're all interesting, so please email me. But the particular interesting one I want to call to your attention, and that's what we're going to do today. So this email is about the word chink, C-H-I-N-K. Dear Jimmy, I went back and on page 305, Alex says this. He waved at a whitewashed square building standing out in the field. That's where the chink sharecroppers live. Good workers. I wish I had some of them. Why didn't you cover this word, chink, in your analysis? I looked it up, and the dictionary said it's a narrow opening or crack, typically one that admits light. But that's not what this means here, does it? I looked further and saw what it probably means in this story is an ethnic slur, usually referring to a person of Chinese descent. So why didn't you point that out to us? Well, that's an excellent question. Thank you for your email. And I don't always point out such words, though I try to make a habit of doing so because these words are important. These slang slur words are important. And sometimes, as in this case, the inquisitive reader like yourself did the investigation on the word, and that's a good thing. It's always a good thing because when you hear the word chink in your armor, you've heard that. That guy's got a chink in his armor, right? Well, that's an opening of light. And is that what this means here? No, but maybe it's an opening. I don't know. Anyway, in this case, this is a slur or slang word that does, in fact, mean it's used on Chinese people. These slur or slang words exist for every ethnic group. I'm not going to tell you my ethnic group, but I've got slang words. You've got slang words. They're all slang words. And we could admit to ourselves, well, we shouldn't use those words. And you're right. We shouldn't use those words. But the fact is, those words will always exist. They always have. They always will. And the point is to see how characters in this story use these words and what that, what that usage tells us about the character. So the way people use words, they might think about the word, but they never say the word. And we're fortunate when we have great literature like Johnny Bear to have a narrator who's a human being. You're going to see that in a moment. But in this case, this word is used by Alex. And he says it. Here's the exact passage right here. The hedge keeps the wind out, Alex shouted. It doesn't keep Johnny Bear out, I said. A shadow crossed his face. He waved at a whitewashed square building out in the field. That's where the chink sharecroppers live. Good workers. I wish I had some of them. Okay? Some like them. Alex remember, the narrator is narrating this. So the narrator is a first-person narrator. He's in the story. He's subject to being human. You're going to talk about that in a minute as well. But in this case, he's telling us this is what Alex said. Now, do we believe him? There's some evidence in here that the first-person narrator, he may not be telling the truth because there is only one truth sayer in this story, and that's Johnny Bear. But Alex is somewhat of a leader in Loma, the town of Loma. You can see what happens at the end of the story when he slugs Johnny Bear, and he's telling the men enough as Johnny tries to reveal even more gossip about the Hawkins sisters. And he's seeing his system destroyed. You've already had foreshadowing where he doesn't know what's going on, but something's going on. And when he uses the word to the narrator, it's right before we see the Hawkins sisters as they're going to church. So we already know, since we read the story, what happens, that Amy, in fact, had an affair with a Chinese sharecropper, right? There's evidence for that. And even though he wishes he had workers for them, the Chinese sharecroppers work the land owned by those sisters, And we suspect Amy had that affair, and that's why she hung herself. Yeah, we can conclude that based on the narration safely. I've had some emails, and I don't even want to bring this up now, where somebody was trying to prove to me that Alex is the father of Amy's child. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to cover that email, but I will say this about that email. That's a stretch. There's slight evidence, but chances are there is no evidence. Anyway, he was down on his stomach the way he had been when he got me. Sing-song nasal words, Chinese, I thought, and then it seemed to me that the same words were repeated in another voice, slower and not nasally. That's Amy. This is the Chinese sharecropper. Johnny Bear raised his shaggy head. Whiskey, and when no one buys him a drink, the narrator does, and that's when the first suicide attempt is revealed. I'm pointing out the sing-song because that comes up again later. The other time was when I heard the sing-song nasal voice that sounded like Chinese. Alex looked relieved. This is right before Alex, smacks Johnny. Johnny is repeating the sing-song nasal voice, and then the other slow, hesitant repeating voice without nasal quality. And that's when Alex hits Johnny. So the sing-song nasal voice is used by the narrator to describe the Chinese sharecropper. It's pretty clear because he uses this to describe him. And that's when, if you remember, that's what the Alex doesn't want the narrator to, if you hear anything, you make sure you stop it, if you remember the ending of the story. So he doesn't want anybody to know that Amy, in fact, had an affair with a Chinese sharecropper. We could debate his motivation for not wanting people to know that. But as I said in the analysis, if you read the analysis and listened to the analysis of Johnny Bear, this is really a wonderfully complex story. And the more you read it, the more complex it becomes, which is the nature of great literature. Remember, Ezra Pound said, literature is language charged with meaning. You remember what I told you about the fog in here? And so the word that the Alex uses in this, that the narrator reports Alex using, chink, is just that. It's a slur word. It was used at the time. Nobody thought much about it. Just like words remembered change their meaning. If you read some of our other stories together, you'll see that because Jimmy tries to point them out. That doesn't mean they're bad words. That means they're words used in a story to help you understand the story better. And that doesn't mean you have to go around using these words, but you should understand the words. Some people have actually they don't even know what that word meant. And I've got emails on that. And I've discussed this with people when I do in person, and I know we're not going to do that here. Anyway, it's easy for us to say that Alex is prejudiced and a bigot, but is he? Is he really prejudiced and a bigot? Well, he used the word. Well, that doesn't make him. He admires their work ethic. I wish I had some of them. Well, Jimmy, isn't that a master-slave relationship? Well, you can say that. Sharecroppers did that. They worked the land and kept some of the proceeds for themselves. But if you remember the analysis, I also pointed out the haves and have-nots. There's always going to be haves and have-nots. I can't tell you what Jimmy's tax return was his first year of marriage. It's embarrassing. It's so sad. Oh. But if you review your history, and that's very important for you to do, because that's what these books do. They also bring us into history. What were the times like? Well, I read a historical account. Well, of course you could do that. But isn't this much better to read something, that was created in that era? And when was that? Do you remember? Yep, it's after Prohibition. Small town Loma. So if you review history, all types of people have had prejudice against them. There's not one year in all of history, in any country you can go to, where you will not find prejudice and bigotry. You just won't. Oh, yes, of course, we wish it was a different world. And maybe, Jimmy, if we stopped using those words, it would be a better world. Maybe, maybe not. The best thing to do is to understand them and then choose not to use them. That's a powerful statement, what I just said. I want you to think about that. If you don't know what the word means, you're just gonna say it. But if you know what the word means and you think it will do injury, don't use it. And if you want to cause injury, use it. People of ethnic groups use ethnic slurs with each other. I can tell you that. I know, because from my ethnic group, we call each other ethnic slurs. At least when I was growing up, maybe not now. Choose not to use it. And if you review history, you'll find them. For example, there's other words in here that may offend people. We're not interested in offending anyone. We want you to be offended so you heighten your appreciation of the time. Swinging his arms jerkily the way halfwits do. Halfwits. Call somebody a halfwit and see what happens if he's not a halfwit. You understand? Oh, well, he's challenged now. But people use different meanings, different words. People grow up, right? But that's only true of maybe your little world. That's not true of the real world sometimes. There's certain neighborhoods in Chicago where Jimmy grew up where you wouldn't care what words, you just would not go there. And if you did use the words, that's it. So some people will be offended, some people will not. When you're reading a story like this, if you take offense, stop reading. But you'll be doing yourself an injustice, because those words are only wrong when they're said with intent to harm. Read the passage again. If you think Alex said that to harm anybody, that just came out of his mouth. That's the way people used it. But the whole idea of going into the story is to accept the words. In this case, the narrator is the first person. He's a first-person narrator, and his prejudices, the narrator's prejudice, slips out sometimes as well, right? And if you doubt that, see my review and analysis of Travelers So Broadening if you really want to experience a bigot. If you read that and listen to that analysis, God, Jimmy wanted to pop that guy. So, thank you for your email. Whoop, there's a typo. Look at even Jimmy makes that. That should be thank you for your email and your investigation. And by the way, you aren't the only one that pointed this out, so I'm glad people are taking notes. Steinbeck's Johnny Bear exposes us to people. And as Dostoevsky said, one of Jimmy's favorite authors, in their novels and stories, writers most often try to choose and present vividly and artistically social types which are extremely seldom encountered in life and which are nevertheless more real than real life itself. I believe that. I really believe that. And I think you will believe that too if you stick with Reading with Jimmy. Thank you for reading. This is Jimmy. Thanks again. Reading with Jimmy, right? Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Thanks so much.